Welcome to episode 4 of my developer diary for creating my first ever piece of software that essentially allows you to build templates outside of the DAW environment. In the last video, I showed you some of the improvements I made to the list, where we could reorder tracks, how we can group them together and reorder them inside of groups, and how we can rearrange groups, all that stuff. I've made some slight improvements to that so it works a bit smoother. But also in this video, I want to show you some of the new functionality that I've finally got working after a few days of trying to figure it out. So let's first of all start off by adding some tracks. So violins 1. Okay, and straight off the bat, you'll see we now have icons next to these tracks, so we can tell these are instrument tracks. If I add these to a group, we now have the folder icon for closed and open, and obviously we can do things like, change the color of all those tracks. Now let's go ahead and add some more tracks in. That'll do. Brain's not working correctly. Add these to a group as well, brass, and then give those a color. Okay, so we have our two groups, and we can obviously select these different groups like so. We can rearrange these groups. But what I want to show you is what I've now got built in and working. So let's say for the brass group here, I'm going to be using, Musio for these tracks. And I want to have the Musio sampler load up when I open this project up in Cubase or whatever it is I'm using. So I'm going to select all the tracks in the group here and go to this little drop down list and choose Musio. And it will now apply them to those tracks. Now let's say for the strings down here, I want to use, Opus. I'm going to select Opus. Now I can change these up if I want to. I can, change the individual samplers. In fact, let's do it for a couple here. Let's use Sine, BBC SO. We'll just leave it like that. Now, when I go to export the project, what's going to happen is when we import it into Cubase, the tracks, if we leave them enabled, will load enabled, but the samplers will load. So now we have our brass and strings. Let's go ahead and reorder these. And then I'm going to export the project with the tracks enabled. Okay, and I'm going to call this C. Now, if I just minimize DAWBuddy here and come into Cubase, you can see I've already got some tracks, but I'm just going to remove these because I was testing something out. And then I'm going to import our new DAW project that we've just created. It'll take a bit of time to load because obviously the tracks are enabled. If we exported this with the tracks disabled, it'll be a bit quicker. But there we go. Now we have our tracks here. So if I open up the first one, it should be Opus. The next one should be Contact 7. This one should be Sine. This one should be BBC SO. This one should be Opus again. But it's loaded on the other screen. So let me just drag that across. And then down here, these are all Musio. So you can see that it's working lovely for having the samplers preload on. Now, there are a number of things I need to do with DAWBuddy. One is improve the performance of it, because when you have a lot of tracks in the list, it can start to slow down a little bit. And I think that might be because well, let me just give you an example here. Let me just delete these. Delete all. Let me get some track names here from one of the libraries. Steinberg. Let's choose Steinberg. All right. So there's 150 names. So we can add all these in the project. Now, I can do all the things I showed you before, like grouping and whatnot. However, you'll notice that it's starts to get a little bit choppy when we have a lot of tracks here in the list. So I need to figure out a way to improve the performance. And my thinking is, currently it's trying to render everything in the list, even when it's outside of the view. So I'm thinking that it might be better to only render what is in view and then have a little bit of a buffer of a few tracks. So when you're scrolling through, nothing just suddenly pops up, but it just seems, really smooth. How I go about doing this, I don't know. I need to do some research on it. Virtualization cropped up, but I'm not sure. So if anyone has some good info for me for improving the performance in that sense, that'd be really much appreciated. And I'll look into it and how I can implement that into this, because that's the main one at the moment for me, is improving that performance to make this more viable when you're working with a lot of different tracks. So yeah, any suggestions, leave them in the comments box below, or you can get in touch with me directly through the PoundSound.uk website. Just use the contact form and send us an email. But we're making progress, getting excited. So thanks for watching, and I'll keep you updated with all the new stuff.